What if I told you the worst thing the narcissist ever did to you was never actually about you? Every insult, every betrayal, every silent treatment, every cruel word was serving a purpose, but not the one you think. Today, you're going to discover the uncomfortable truth hidden beneath narcissistic cruelty, why hurting you gives them something they desperately need, and why understanding this changes everything about how you heal. If you've ever wondered why someone who once claimed to love you suddenly became cold, dismissive, or intentionally cruel, stay until the end, because the answer isn't found in what they said. It's hidden inside what they could never admit, not even to themselves. And if this conversation helps you make sense of experiences you've struggled to explain, subscribe and join this community. Every week, we break down the psychology behind toxic relationships so you can stop blaming yourself and start seeing the patterns clearly. One of the hardest truths to accept after experiencing narcissistic abuse is that the pain inflicted upon you was never truly a reflection of your value. It feels deeply personal because the attacks are directed at your character, your emotions, your appearance, your intelligence, or your deepest vulnerabilities. Over time, it becomes easy to believe that if you had been more loving, more patient, or somehow, quote, better, the abuse would have stopped. But this belief overlooks the psychological reality driving narcissistic behavior. Their actions are rooted in an unstable sense of self that depends on constantly protecting a fragile ego. When they experience insecurity, criticism, rejection, or even the possibility of losing control, they search for a way to relieve the unbearable discomfort inside them. Instead of confronting their own fears or accepting responsibility, they redirect those painful emotions outward. The closest person often becomes the easiest target because they know exactly where to strike. They study your hopes, fears, and emotional needs, then use that knowledge as a weapon whenever they feel threatened. Their cruelty is less about who you are and more about what they are trying to escape within themselves. This explains why they may treat different people in remarkably similar ways, despite those individuals having completely different personalities. The pattern follows them because the source of the problem travels with them. Understanding this does not excuse the abuse, nor does it erase the damage it causes. It simply shifts the focus away from the destructive question of what is wrong with me toward the far more accurate realization that you were caught in the emotional storm created by someone who could not tolerate facing their own insecurity. The moment you stop measuring your worth through their behavior is the moment their distorted version of you begins to lose its power. For a narcissist, emotional pain is often used as a tool of control rather than an accidental consequence of conflict. Most healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, compromise, and emotional safety, where disagreements are resolved through honest communication. A narcissistic individual, however, frequently views relationships through the lens of power. The question is not, how do we solve this problem together, but rather, who has the upper hand. When they sense that their influence is slipping, they may resort to behaviors designed to destabilize the other person emotionally. This can include silent treatment, harsh criticism, gaslighting, public humiliation, broken promises, jealousy, or sudden emotional withdrawal. Each tactic creates uncertainty, causing the other person to focus less on their own needs and more on regaining the narcissist's approval. As confusion grows, confidence begins to shrink. The target may start overanalyzing every conversation, apologizing for things they did not do, or walking on eggshells to avoid triggering another painful episode. This shift is exactly what strengthens the narcissist's position. The more emotionally exhausted and self-doubting someone becomes, the easier they are to influence and manipulate. Even brief moments of kindness after periods of cruelty can deepen this cycle, creating hope that the relationship is improving while reinforcing emotional dependence. Over time, the victim may confuse relief with love, believing that the return of affection means genuine change. In reality, the unpredictable alternation between warmth and hostility keeps the relationship emotionally off balance, making it increasingly difficult to leave. Control is maintained not through genuine connection, but through uncertainty, fear, and the constant pursuit of emotional stability. The narcissist often experiences this dominance as reassurance that they still matter, still possess influence, and can shape another person's emotional world whenever they choose, reinforcing a cycle that revolves around power rather than authentic intimacy. One of the greatest misconceptions about narcissistic behavior is that they feel threatened only by criticism or rejection. In reality, your personal growth, emotional stability, and increasing independence can become just as unsettling to them. A narcissist often feels most comfortable when they believe they are the center of your emotional world. If your confidence depends on their approval, your decisions revolve around their opinions, or your happiness rises and falls with their mood, they experience a reassuring sense of control. The moment you begin developing your own identity, setting healthy boundaries, pursuing meaningful goals, or finding fulfillment outside the relationship, that sense of control begins to weaken. To a psychologically healthy partner, your independence would be something to celebrate. To a narcissist, however, it may feel like a direct threat to their importance. They may respond by criticizing your ambitions, mocking your achievements, questioning your judgment, or creating unnecessary conflict whenever you experience success. Sometimes they become distant or dismissive during your happiest moments, not because your accomplishments lack value, but because your growing confidence reminds them that you no longer rely on them for validation. This shift can awaken deep fears of being abandoned, ignored, or exposed as less significant than they desperately want to believe. Rather than processing those fears honestly, they often attempt to pull you back into a position of self-doubt. They may remind you of past mistakes, compare you unfavorably to others, or subtly undermine your confidence until you begin questioning yourself again. Their goal is not always conscious or carefully planned, but the pattern serves the same purpose. If you doubt your own strength, you are more likely to seek reassurance from the very person creating the insecurity. This allows the narcissist to restore the imbalance of power that feels familiar, replacing your growing autonomy with renewed emotional dependence and preserving the control they fear losing most. One of the most confusing aspects of narcissistic behavior is how confidently they accuse others of the very qualities they struggle to acknowledge within themselves. This psychological process, known as projection, allows them to distance themselves from painful emotions they cannot tolerate. Deep beneath the image of superiority or confidence often lies an intense fear of inadequacy, shame, rejection, or failure. Instead of confronting these uncomfortable feelings, they unconsciously assign them to someone else. If they secretly feel insecure, they may repeatedly call you weak or incompetent. If they struggle with dishonesty, they may accuse you of being untrustworthy. If they harbor envy, they may insist that you are the jealous one. These accusations often seem irrational because they are not based on objective reality, but on emotions the narcissist is trying to escape. Over time, this constant stream of blame can become deeply disorienting. You may find yourself defending against claims that do not match your behavior, questioning your own memory, or wondering whether you really are the person they describe. This confusion serves another purpose by shifting attention away from the narcissist's own behavior and placing you in a permanent state of self-examination. Meanwhile, they avoid the painful task of looking inward. The more you focus on proving your innocence, the less energy remains to recognize the unhealthy dynamics unfolding around you. This is why conversations with a narcissist often feel circular and exhausting, with responsibility continually redirected away from them. Understanding projection helps explain why their criticisms can seem strangely disconnected from reality. Their words frequently reveal more about the emotional burdens they are carrying than about the person standing in front of them. Recognizing this pattern does not erase the emotional impact of their attacks, but it can help you stop internalizing accusations that were never an accurate reflection of your character in the first place. Before we continue, take a moment to share your experience in the comments. Have you ever realized that someone wasn't trying to win an argument, they were trying to hurt you? Your story might help someone else recognize patterns they have been living with for years. And if you're finding value in this discussion, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more psychology-based insights that help you protect your emotional well-being. One of the most painful realizations for people who have experienced narcissistic abuse is recognizing that their emotional reactions often became part of the cycle the narcissist relied upon. This does not mean you caused the abuse or that your feelings were wrong. Anyone repeatedly exposed to criticism, manipulation, or emotional neglect would naturally react with sadness, anger, confusion, or fear. The difference is that a narcissist may interpret these reactions very differently than a healthy person would. Instead of seeing your tears as a signal to show compassion, or your frustration as an opportunity to resolve conflict. They may see your emotional response as evidence of their influence. Your visible distress reassures them that they still have the power to shape your emotional state. This sense of control can temporarily soothe their own insecurity, making your reactions unintentionally reinforce the unhealthy dynamic. That is why they may continue provoking arguments long after the original issue has been resolved. They might repeat hurtful comments, deny obvious facts, bring up old mistakes, or deliberately push emotional buttons they have learned over time. The goal is not necessarily to solve a disagreement, but to create an emotional response that confirms they still occupy the center of your attention. Even intense negative emotions can serve this purpose because they demonstrate that your focus remains fixed on them. Over time, many people become trapped in a cycle of explaining, defending, pleading, or trying to make the narcissist understand the pain they have caused. Unfortunately, these efforts often produce little lasting change because the interaction itself can reinforce the narcissist's sense of significance. Breaking this pattern does not require suppressing your emotions or pretending the abuse did not hurt. It means gradually redirecting your emotional energy toward your own healing instead of continually seeking validation, accountability, or empathy from someone who repeatedly uses your vulnerability as a measure of their own importance. At the beginning of a relationship, a narcissist may seem deeply attentive, affectionate, and genuinely invested in your happiness. They notice your dreams, mirror your values, shower you with compliments, and create the feeling that you have finally met someone who understands you completely. This stage can feel intensely validating because it satisfies a natural human desire to be seen and appreciated. However, this idealization is often less about truly knowing you and more about securing admiration, attention, and emotional investment. As long as you reflect back the image they want to see, the relationship may appear almost perfect. The shift begins when reality inevitably enters the picture. You express a different opinion, establish a boundary, need emotional support yourself, or simply stop providing constant admiration. Instead of adapting to the normal give and take of a healthy relationship, the narcissist may interpret these ordinary moments as personal threats. The admiration they once enjoyed no longer feels guaranteed, and disappointment is redirected toward you. Gradually, compliments become criticism, affection becomes indifference, and patience gives way to contempt. Qualities they once praised may suddenly become flaws. The independence they admired may now be labeled selfishness. Your kindness may be dismissed as weakness. This dramatic reversal leaves many people desperately trying to regain the loving person they met in the beginning, believing they somehow caused the change. In reality, the shift often reflects the narcissist's inability to maintain an idealized view of another person once that person becomes fully human with needs, imperfections, and opinions of their own. Rather than integrating both strengths and flaws into a balanced perception, they may swing between extremes, seeing someone as entirely wonderful or entirely disappointing. This pattern creates emotional instability, leaving the other person constantly striving to earn back approval that was never based on unconditional respect or genuine emotional intimacy in the first place. A narcissist often works very hard to create a carefully managed public image that earns admiration, respect, or sympathy. To acquaintances, co-workers, extended family, or even close friends, they may appear charming, generous, successful, or exceptionally confident. This image is not always entirely false, but it is usually incomplete. It highlights the qualities they want others to see, while concealing the insecurity, manipulation, and emotional volatility that emerge in more intimate relationships. The people who spend the most time with them are often the first to notice the contradictions between the public persona and the private reality. This is why someone who begins recognizing these inconsistencies can become deeply threatening to the narcissist. It is not simply that you know their flaws. It is that you have witnessed the gap between the image they project and the behavior they desperately hope remains hidden. When they sense that you are no longer accepting the version of reality they have constructed, they may intensify manipulation in an effort to protect that image. They might accuse you of misunderstanding them, portray you as unstable or overly sensitive, or begin a campaign to discredit your credibility before you have the opportunity to speak. In some cases, they isolate you from supportive relationships, making it more difficult for others to compare experiences and recognize recurring patterns. Their fear is not only that others will discover the truth, but also that they will be forced to confront parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Maintaining the carefully crafted facade becomes more important than preserving trust, honesty, or emotional closeness. As a result, relationships may become increasingly focused on protecting appearances rather than resolving genuine problems. The closer someone comes to seeing behind the mask, the more likely they are to encounter defensiveness, hostility, denial, or attempts to rewrite events. Because preserving the illusion often feels safer to the narcissist than facing the vulnerability hidden beneath it. The most important truth to remember is that the narcissist's desire to hurt you was never evidence of your weakness. It was evidence of their inability to cope with their own emotional reality. Every attempt to control you, diminish you, confuse you, or make you question your worth revealed far more about their inner world than it ever did about yours. The more you understand these patterns, the less power they have to define your story. Knowledge transforms confusion into clarity, self-blame into self-compassion, and fear into confidence. Healing begins the moment you stop asking why you were not enough for them and start recognizing that no amount of love, sacrifice, or perfection could have filled the emptiness they refused to face within themselves. Your greatest victory is not making the narcissist regret what they did. It is reclaiming your peace, trusting your own judgment again, and building a life that no longer revolves around their approval or rejection. When you choose boundaries over chaos, self-respect over self-sacrifice, and truth over manipulation, you break the cycle that once kept you emotionally captive. The person who once believed they could control your emotions eventually discovers they can no longer control your future. And that is the one outcome they never expected, because the strongest response to manipulation is not retaliation, but a life lived with clarity, freedom, and unwavering self-worth. If this discussion helped you understand narcissistic behavior in a new way, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more psychology-based insights, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message today. Sometimes a single insight is enough to help someone stop blaming themselves and finally begin to heal.